Okay. So here we are once again on a Sunday. We're here every week except last week because it was Easter. But we're here pretty much every week, Sunday from 11:30 a.m. until about 1:30 p.m. California time. So if you're watching the recording, you can tune in next time, next week. So audio should be fine. Let me know if you guys can hear me well. Fernando, welcome. We already had a comment in here before we started from Dagnichu. Sorry, I probably said that really horrible. Thank you for the comment. Welcome, yes. Fernando, let me know if you have any questions. Hope you're doing well. Let's see. We can bring up some recent comments. Well, the eating vowel lesson is doing very well so far, which is good. Let's see. Comments. Got anything? Fernando, what's the difference between obsessed with and obsessed of? Obsessed of. Does that even exist? Obsessed of. Obsessed of. I don't think obsessed of exists. Sometimes there are lesser used prepositions, like combinations. There's usually like a standard preposition. And then there might be some lesser used combinations that might mean something slightly different. And because of that, if obsessed of does exist, it's not coming to my mind. It doesn't sound good. But if I had a context that it does exist in, then I'd be like, oh, yeah. But doing an internet search here, I can't find anything that says obsessed of. I can't think of any uses of obsessed of. So the difference would be obsessed of is wrong. And ouch, if I remember right, you are a Spanish speaker. If not Spanish, probably Portuguese. We get a lot of Spanish and Portuguese speakers in here. But I don't know. Obsesionado de, I think maybe. That's probably it. Because if I wanted to say obsessed with in Spanish, I'd probably try to say like I'm obsessed with that. Estoy obsesionado con eso, which might be wrong in Spanish. So I'm imagining that maybe of is coming from like that Spanish background. So if you can give me like a source, like if you actually heard obsessed of from a native speaker, then I can analyze and see what's going on there. But otherwise, I'm going to say it doesn't exist. I can check Youglish too, because Youglish sometimes reveals some surprising results. Obsessed of. Wow, 1 out of 974. Okay, so let's see what's actually going on here. Back. Okay, so this is obsessed, comma, of course. So that doesn't count. What? Okay, so now I see there's a video where he says for the less internet obsessed of you. So we have obsessed and of next to each other. This is where you have to be careful, okay? Because there are cases where you have the word, like the verb, plus the preposition, and they're working together. They're connected, okay? Not in a phrasal verb way, just that's the preposition that will either that does go with that verb or that maybe most commonly goes with that verb or whatever, because some verbs can use multiple prepositions without necessarily becoming a phrasal verb. Point here is that sometimes you get cases where it's literally just there's a verb and there's a preposition, and they're not actually related. The preposition is connected to what's after the verb. So on Youglish, the second video under the US entries, the guy says, for the less internet obsessed of you. That's not obsessed of, it's another way to say for those of you, right? That's the of. For those of you who are less obsessed with the internet, right? And it's a way to phrase it. So it's for the less internet obsessed of you. So less internet obsessed is like a compound adjective, sort of you meaning among you, right? So that's not obsessed of together. So you gave an example here, obsessed of being a good person. That makes no sense. Absolutely no sense. It would be obsessed with being a good person. Yeah. So again, maybe there's some special context, but I would imagine that there's maybe some Spanish influence in the background. There's maybe you've seen some cases where obsessed and of are together, like they're next to each other, but they're not actually linked together. The of is actually, it's part of a different structure, not actually part of the verb, or something like that. Now, if you hear something like obsessed of being a good person, if you heard that from a native speaker, I would like to know the source so that I can go and look at it. Sometimes weird things happen. I cannot imagine a native speaker saying that. Like I would be very, very surprised. So basically just use obsessed with. Ignore the of. There is no obsessed of. David, welcome. I like to jump rope and I like to play jump rope are the same. Kind of, sort of. So if you play jump rope, there's a game, a specific game that usually children play, where you have one person here, one person here, one person in the middle, and there's usually one or two ropes that are going around, and the person in the middle has to jump over the ropes. That's playing jump rope. And maybe there's other variations of it, but it's like a game, right? Where if you say I like to jump rope, it could be in that game. That, I mean, technically you're jumping rope, but usually we'll use that for just exercise. Like if you just have a rope and you're just jumping over it, that's to jump rope instead of to play. You're not playing jump rope, you're exercising. So they're not exactly the same, but they kind of, one of them overlaps with the other one. Delio, how have you been? Decent, very busy, dealing with some stuff, but that's life. I hope you're well as well. So nice to be here. Yes, welcome, Miguel. Welcome. Seeing you a lot in the comments. Glad to have you here on the live stream. Let me know if you have any specific questions, of course. Was just watching the eating vowels lesson. Props to the chef. The vowels are delicious, yeah. Well, I guess so. I mean, I specifically said at the start of the video, we're not actually eating vowels. I hope you guys liked that, because I kind of thought of that, like when I was recording it, it came out very naturally. I was kind of just joking, and then when I was editing it, I was like, I can do something with this. So I thought that part came out pretty well. But yeah, I already have several other lessons recorded. I just have to do the editing. I'm at the point where I'm like, I'm done editing. Like I have to do it, but I can't do it because I'm so over editing. That's part of the reason why it took me so long to get this video out, because I hate the thought of editing at this point. It's like the single worst part of a YouTube channel, which is why I really want to get an editor, but the channel is not making enough for me to do that yet. So I have to keep editing. Backwards Anderson. No thread. No. Welcome. Yes. What's up? How's it hanging? We don't have any questions yet, guys. Come on. Where are the questions? Give me the questions. I'm here to answer all the questions. We did have one question in the comments recently from Abdullah635 asking about words like murder, murderer, quarter, order, where you have like R, flap D, R. I could talk a little bit about that probably. Do you have any help for review? Spam. Of course. Okay. Okay, so we do have some questions here. So if we run into a lull of sorts, I'll probably talk about like R plus flap D plus R. But okay, Kevin, for you to see. Oh, okay, Kevin is here for us to see, apparently. Welcome. Can you tell me what's wrong with my accent pronunciation placement? Thank you. And then a link. I guess that's the end of it, because you probably know that YouTube won't actually allow you to post a link. YouTube.com/paste. Let's see. This does not give me a page. So I don't know if that's a link to something or what's at the end there. But I tried to put that at the end of youtube.com/ and it says that page doesn't exist. So I don't know if you're trying to link me to something or not, but that, I mean, I guess I could do something like that. I haven't really, that actually might be a good use of part of the live stream time where I actually like listen to your guys' accent. I think I did a little bit of that with Fluent American, kind of. So if you guys want to do something like that, I guess we could. I'm going to leave that up to you, because I know it's whatever, but that wouldn't be like the whole live stream. I like the general Q&A Hangout format, but it probably would be very useful to give you guys some direct feedback like that. But for Kevin, so you're asking a big question. You're basically asking me like, like you want to send me a link of you to you speaking, and then you want me to tell you what's everything that's wrong, like. Which I'd probably have to go in and do an analysis. I'd have to really listen carefully to certain elements. I noticed you use the term placement. This is my personal opinion, my personal perspective. Whenever people use the term placement, I like to tell them to ignore the concept of placement, unless maybe you speak a language that's very nasal. But it's not about placement. It's about posture, mouth posture, vocal tract posture. Do not try to speak from your chest or anything like that. So that would be the biggest thing. I would recommend that you go check out the mouth posture lessons. I have the first 2 up. I'm in the process of making the others as I further explore and refine my techniques around the concept. But yeah, I'll link that playlist. I think I have 3 videos. The first video is just sort of introducing the concept, so you know what's going on. Content. No, playlist. What am I doing? Playlists. This one. Okay. So I can paste links because, you know, I'm not going to post spam on my own live stream. So YouTube allows that. So yeah, if you do that, if you go watch that playlist, at least the first lesson, you'll understand kind of why I don't like the idea of placement so much, and why mouth posture is really the key to developing everything. And I'm developing the mini course right now for using the mouth posture idea to get a perfect or near perfect accent. It's not easy; it's a lot of work, but so far the results I've gotten from the people I've been working with have been nothing but fantastic. So I would say start there. No Nut, is chick offensive in any way, or it just means right? It means, yeah, the S at the end, which is a Z sound here. Young girl, young bird. Yeah, girl or bird. I hear a lot of guys mentioning I had a relationship with this chick once. Okay, good question. So there are two meanings of the word. Yes, if you use it to refer to a baby bird, like a bird that just hatched from an egg, that's the term. It's a chick. That's not offensive in any way. It's what we call it. Like a baby dog is a puppy, a baby cat is a kitten, a baby bird is a chick. Okay, so that's fine. When using it to refer to a girl or a woman, it's not. It's definitely not a young girl. No, you're going to get in a lot of trouble if you go down that road. So yeah, don't confuse, because like baby bird, young girl, no, there's no connection there. So it's going to be used to refer to someone that you are romantically interested in. So not a young girl, hopefully. There are many women who do find it offensive, especially if they're feminists. And there are a lot of women, in my experience, that don't really care too much. It doesn't really bother them. So it can be offensive. If you don't want to offend anybody, don't use it. You don't have to use it. But it is slang. It is basically a slang word for girl, woman, whatever that you are romantically interested in. Yes. So why? I don't know. There's probably a reason, but that's what it is. So do you think is it possible? Okay, so you're doing question structure, broken grammar. Okay, so if you say, is it possible, blah, 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 that's a question, because the is before the it. If you say, do you think, blah, 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 that's a question structure, right? But you're saying, do you think, is it possible? Well, you want to say, you can only do the question structure once. Do you think that, we don't have to say that, we can drop it, but there's now a second clause, a second idea. Do you think that it is possible? Okay. The only time that, and I know this isn't your question, but I like to take these opportunities to mention these little details here. The only time that you're going to hear it the way that you put it, like, do you think, is it possible? And it might be a typo, I know, but it could happen that way if the person is very quickly changing their thought, changing the structure of what they're going to ask. So it's not normal, but like if I say, because often there would be a pause, like, do you think, is it possible? Okay, so it's like question, and then I'm like, okay, wait, hold on. Let me take a second to reformulate. What am I actually asking? Okay, question. So now I'm saying, is it again? Now, if people are speaking really quickly, they might rely a bit more on intonation, not really have that pause, but still make that change. And so it seems like that's the sentence structure, but it's not. It's actually two things, with the first one being canceled. So you might hear somebody say, like, again, this isn't normal, but you might at some point hear somebody say, like, do you think, is it possible? Do you think, is it possible? They're actually switching their question a little bit. It's broken. So anyway, so do you think it's possible? It is possible to learn languages during sleep. Logically speaking, I've always thought it was impossible, but maybe you pick up something subconsciously this way. Who knows? The word lava. Why is there? Okay, so that's a different question. So an ordinary guy, welcome, welcome. A big grammar welcome, analyzing your question there. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. If there's a mistake or whatever, it's an excellent opportunity for everybody to learn, even if it ends up just being a typo. No problem, no big deal. Mistakes are unavoidable, so let's go ahead and make them and learn from them. So, is it possible to learn languages during sleep? Honestly, I am not decided. I am undecided on this issue. I'm gonna say if it is possible, you're not gonna get much out of it. Maybe you can get something. I know that there was some research, and I think somebody was like developing a product or something. I saw like some presentation a while ago. I don't remember what it was for, but it was talking about like language and sleep and like learning a language during your sleep. And apparently there was like some effectiveness to it. Um, so I mean, yeah, but is it going can you just, like, learn an entire language from, like, nothing all the way to becoming, like, a fluent native speaker just through your sleep? I would probably say no. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe there's a way to do that, but I would say no, and I mean, you could try it, I guess. I don't think you have anything to lose. Just, like, every night, play stuff in English, while you're sleeping, and, um, if it works, it works, but you would definitely just like while you're awake, you need lots of input and exposure to the language over time. You would need the same thing in your sleep, but I would imagine you would need even more in your sleep because you're sleeping. So I don't know. I was gonna say something else about that. What was that? Oh yeah. Whenever I think of languages and sleep, I don't know if because I know some American cartoons go international, some don't, obviously depending on the country you're from. Back in like, the 90s, which is the period I'm going to refer to because that's where I grew up. You may not have had access to American cartoons, but there's an American cartoon from the 90s, early 2000s called Dexter's Lab. Uh, and I don't know if you've ever seen that, but there's one of the episodes where Dexter, he's like a super smart genius kid, and he wants to learn French uh, in his sleep. And so there's like this CD tape thing that he plays while he sleeps. But there's like an error with the CD and it keeps skipping. And so it's at the beginning. He's like cheese omelet, omelette du fromage, or however you say that in French, something like that. And it just keeps skipping the whole night. Omelette du fromage, omelette du fromage. And then when he wakes up, that's all he can say. And it's this stupid episode where like he becomes like popular. He becomes like this like crazy singer. He's on the cover of magazines because he's like omelette du fromage, and like everybody loves it, and it's just weird. But um, that's what I think of when I think of languages and sleep. Okay, the word lava. Why is there a schwa at the end of the word? It sounds like the second something to me. Okay, so most. I don't know if I can make a blanket statement here. I'm going to say, at least off the top of my head, most words that end in an unstressed A, or that even start with an unstressed A. So we're talking about the letter A, okay, not the sound. We don't want to confuse the letters and the sounds, especially in English. So if a word ends or starts with an unstressed A, there's probably many exceptions to this, but in general, it's very common that it will be a schwa. It's just something that we do. And then if you introduce, like if you're a Spanish speaker, for example, and you listen to an American who has a thick English accent, what are they going to do? There's a lot of words, especially a lot of nouns that end in A in Spanish, in the letter A. And for example, the word casa, like was in the most recent video. So we don't say casa. We say, well, first we'll say ka instead of ka. Like in Spanish, we'll say casa, 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 casa. Um, It's just what we do. It's a pattern in the English language, or at least in American English. So that would be why. But you're saying it sounds like something else to you. So I imagine you went to the dictionary and it said that it was a schwa. But you're hearing it not as a schwa. There are many words where there's a fully enunciated version, like a fully pronounced version, and then a super, super common version that is not necessarily less enunciated on the stress syllable, but where the unstressed syllable gets reduced so much that it kind of is the standard. And the dictionary will only show you the reduced one. So I think believe is a good example of that. Let me double check. So actually, let me look up lava. What does it say for lava? Yeah, it shows you a schwa. Look up believe. Okay, so believe in the dictionary is transcribed with e. Now, in the case of, say, lava, there is a slightly more full enunciated way to say the word that doesn't reduce that last syllable. 99.9% of the time, it's probably going to be at the end. Just a nice little However, there are two things that can happen. One, because it is a schwa and because the upside down V in American English is basically part of the range of the schwa, we might end up opening down into that, or we can actually shift a little closer to the start of the I diphthong. Somewhere in there could be a bit more like enunciated full version. So like instead of lava, it'd be like lava, lava, lava. That's possible. We just don't usually say it that way. With believe, I like believe as a case because the really super full way to say the word is with believe, and you will sometimes hear it that way, especially if we're really emphasizing that word. But usually it's going to be reduced to either be, which is what the dictionary says it is, or it could reduce all the way down to a schwa, like be b. See, the dictionary doesn't tell you that. Sometimes the dictionary will give you multiple things, but there's quite a few cases where the dictionary will just give you one option, and there's actually like sort of like maybe a bit more fuller way to say it, or an extra way to reduce it. And that's another reason why I say don't really like going to the dictionary to check pronunciation is useful to an extent. It's only useful to an extent. It's probably not going to give you all the information. And even then, especially if you're relying on the IPA is a horrible, horrible tool, in my opinion, for language learning. It's great for linguists, but it's not so great for language learning. So anyway, which, by the way, I finally recorded the lesson on why I don't recommend using the IPA. So that'll be coming soon. It's recorded. I don't know when I'm going to actually publish it because I have like 3 or 4 videos I recorded, but it's coming very soon. Okay. Also, being fashionably late. Why would anyone want to be late? My punctual mind doesn't understand. Yeah, I know. Well, this is partially a cultural thing. I know, at least I could be wrong, but based on my experience and what people have told me, I know, say, for example, in Germany, like if you're a German, you come from like a German culture, punctual is punctual. Like you're there, right? In Mexico, apparently, if you tell your friend, oh yeah, I'll be there at 8 o'clock, that really means, oh, I'll be there at like maybe 9:30. And that's straight from my Spanish partner who's from Mexico. So if you're from Mexico and you disagree with that and that sounds a little weird to you, that's just what I was told. So in English, in American English specifically, fashionably late. There's probably an origin to it. So obviously, like, you don't want to be late, right? So if you arrive late, you need an excuse, right? Like, okay, why are you late? Well, I think this term originated with maybe like fashion oriented women, right? Who, they're really onto, like, the trends and all this stuff, and maybe even like valley girls and stuff. I don't know, but that type of, interest in fashion and clothes and stuff. And so it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm, of course, I'm not going to be there early. I'm not going to be there on time because, well, that means that I didn't put in the effort to, look my best. So I'm going to be a little late because, I need all this time to, like, I don't know if that's the actual mindset or where it originated, but that's kind of in my mind how it makes sense. So you're fashionable because you look good, right? And you're late because you wanted to look good. Like, you took the extra time to make sure that you are really presentable, and that, maybe even people would be like, oh, look, like, you look so great, blah, 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 get compliments. Otherwise, it could just, it's just kind of in practicality and in real life. I think we just tend to use it because, like, I could use it. I'm not a woman. I'm not into fashion. Um, I think we tend to use it more just as, like, sort of a joking excuse, sort of like, well, yeah, who comes early, like, because maybe I happened to be late. I didn't plan to be late, but it's like, well, it's 30 minutes after and I didn't get here until now, so, oh, I'm just fashionably late. Everybody can just wait for me, and then I'll show up, and it'll be, the party has arrived. I don't know. So it's just a phrase we have. um Hopefully that makes sense. uh okay, so yeah, Kevin, I saw you tried to post that. YouTube was wanted me to confirm it. YouTube does not work well with you giving me links um, in the chat. Even in the comments, it'll usually put it into the spam folder, and then did not tell me about it, which is annoying. If you can give me the name of the video, and maybe, I assume it's your username, so I can look up your username and the name of the video. Or if it's the only video you have, I could just look up your username, and we can go with that. So maybe if you just give me, like, the title of the video, I can look it up. Okay. Fernando, I read somewhere chick comes from the Spanish word chica. Probably. That's actually good. Yeah, that's a really good explanation. I'm going to go with that. Yeah. Notice I kind of made it into, like, an ah sound because I was sort of between Spanish and English there, but chica, chica, chica. That's how we would say it in English if we were take that Spanish word chica. So, of course, we're going to drop the at the end. We're going to change the e to I, because now it sounds like a word we actually have to refer to a baby bird and chick. Okay, so it changes. Yeah. So that's what English does, right? It's the chameleon language. It just absorbs, like, randomly absorbs words from everywhere. Interesting, makes sense. I remember that comment was when I was talking about what was it? Something. Anyway, I don't remember. Hello, what is your opinion of what? This might be something trying to get me to say something weird. I don't see how that sounds like anything. Huh? Okay, that's nothing. Looks like it's something in another language. Low Prussian dialect. Yeah, so I'm not getting any results on that, which means you're probably trying to make me say something weird. Without saying it out loud, I can't make any sense of what you're trying to get me to say. I'm going to assume that this is a troll comment. But since it's not so obviously offensive, I'm going to leave it. Okay. Things. Come on, guys. I already caught up. So I can talk a bit really quick about that question I had from Abdullah. So R plus flap D plus R, because a lot of other people will benefit from this too. So R plus flap D plus R with no spaces because I'm awesome like that. Okay. I know I've talked about this in the live streams before. I might have a short kind of talking a little bit about it. But it's always good. There are new people here who haven't seen that material. So how do you do this? It's a bit of a trick because, as I've talked about before, I actually think I have to make a mini lesson on this because I don't remember if it was in the D lesson. The flap D, the basic way to make it is tongue comes up and taps around where the D would usually be placed, which is not on the teeth, it's behind the teeth. Okay, not too far back where mouth starts going up here. You want to be more or less on that bump. Duh, you just flap there. Duh. Okay, so if I say, for example, what if? Remember, there is no flapped T. If it happens to be spelled with a T, the sound that's produced is a D when it flaps. So if we trigger that flap, it's always a flapped D, regardless of if it's written with a T or a D. So what if? You just kind of drop into that next sound. Now, obviously, the next sound could be up here. The next sound could be down here. The next sound could be back here. And that's going to have some sort of small effect. But it's usually only the extremes of E, which is very closed up here. Let's see. Yeah, extremes of E, maybe a little bit with oo, but it's not really too much of a change or too extra difficult. So the E pulling into the which is already a difficult sound by itself. There might be maybe with the half L. We know the half L, the dark vowel, or the dark L, half L vowel sound, is difficult in itself. So getting from the flap into that might also be a little tricky. But usually the E and the cause some extra problems. So instead of just tapping, if you're doing an E, you're going to kind of tap and push. And I just mentioned that for completeness. So if I say like what he, and I tap it, drop the H, whatty. So my tongue's going to kind of come up. It's going to tap and push. So that's the flap there as you go into E. So you have to get your tongue to do something a little bit different than what you would normally just tap with. For the R, so if we're going into R, the R vowel specifically, like in order, water, what was one of the other words? I'll do water first because there's no R before it. So we'll say water. You go ah, wah, 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 and then we're gonna tap, but we can't just go wah at a It's not gonna work because then the tongue's going this way, but we need it to go this way into the R. So the way we fix that is we're going to, number one, we're gonna tap and pull. So it's not tap and release or tap and push forward, it's tap and pull. The second thing that we usually do to make this a little easier is instead of going to that normal spot, we'll actually go a bit farther back with where we tap. So there's the bump, right? Your top teeth here, bump, and then the part of your mouth, like that palate, whatever, the roof of your mouth, that goes up around like that. Right where that starts, okay, right where it starts to go up, we're going to sort of tap right there. And to make it even easier than that, we're probably going to just tap right here. Okay, so if this is the tip of the tongue, normally when we tap, right, it's just that, and it'll probably be really all of it, but the tip is included, right? So it's about like getting that. It's closing just like it would for a D, except we don't take the time to close it and push it out. We just immediately release it, and so it flaps instead. If you're going to the to make it a little easier, we'll go farther back. And because of how the mouth is shaped, right, it goes up and back this way, but it also goes around this way. Because of that, we can actually get it to where we just tap. So it's like the sides of the tip. And then the tip will actually be slightly down. So there's actually a little space that doesn't actually hit anything. And we just very lightly tap the corners of the tip and then pull into the That makes it a lot faster and easier, but you have to sort of practice that and get used to it. So instead of trying to say like water, water, which you could, sounds a little hard. To make it a little faster and a little easier, you just go back a little. Don't quite use the actual tip itself. Use the sides of the tip. Water, water, water. So technically speaking, it is a slightly different sound using similar mechanics. So you're not trying to produce the exact same flap D that you normally do. But there's no other way that it would be interpreted as a native. It's not like a separate sound. And so we have this little bit of a range that we can work with how we release that flap in order to move into the next sound, and it'll still sound great. That's the real trick. When we're going from R to flap D to R, this, you don't actually really have to flap here, because remember, R is a vowel and a consonant. So it can still trigger if you have an R colored vowel in front of it, like order, party, murder, whatever. So you have an or an R colored vowel in front of it, and then you have an or an R colored vowel after it, maybe. Usually it's just going to be after it, because then you're just tapping and going into the instead of tapping and going into, say, R, because that would allow you to open more. So if you're going back into that if we say order, right? So or, we're in that or. Okay, so what do we do? Well, we know we need to get the tongue, instead of being here, which, remember, the tip, it doesn't matter if you do the retroflex or the bunch. It does not matter what the tip of the tongue is doing for the R. It's completely irrelevant. I have lessons on the R and all that. You can go check out if you haven't seen. But you want to get from that R, you need to sort of get, okay, the tip of my tongue needs to get somewhere up around here to flap, right? So you know that's your goal. Now, even more so, since we're going to go right back into the anyway, why take the time to go all the way up here, flap, and then come all the way back here, right? There's two things you can do. One, you can go here, just do a D, a weak D, okay? Order. Sounds a little hard, but it sounds fine because the R's around it, even for us natives, it makes it a little tough, right? It's a tough combination. It's not that we necessarily have any problems making it. It's just like the is kind of a heavy sound, and the D is also kind of a heavy sound, if that makes sense. Where, like, compared to, say, like the flat D or like the Spanish trilled R, right? That feels kind of lighter, right? So when we have like heavy sound, to get that flap in between those two R's, possible, but it makes it a little extra difficult to flap it, and so you don't actually have to flap it. But if you do, like if you're speaking really quickly, you get it a little bit lighter in between. Order. You have to do this method that I showed you, tapping, pulling, but with just the sides of the tip here, the corners of the tip, because otherwise, it's, by the time you get up here, it's going to be really, really hard to flap because of the way that the tongue is going in and out of the So that extra, this is my explanation of it. The extra tension would make it a lot easier to just do a solid weak D instead of sort of like extending out really quick, tapping just the corners of the tip and then going right back in. So you're just kind of doing that instead of all the way up. If that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. So we get order. That flap can even be so weak that it's really almost, it's like right here. That like barely taps. And like the whole front of the tongue, the whole tip of the tongue, it like just doesn't touch at all. If you're speaking really quick and lazily, order. See, I'm just hitting aha, instead of aha. So it's just a little bit farther back, a little bit more open. So play with that range. Well, I tried. Yeah, I don't see anything from you, Kevin. Okay, you have let's say 8 videos. You have 8 videos. I could just pick one of these videos. I assume it's you talking in all of these. You're doing tech reviews, like phone reviews and stuff. So I'll let you confirm first my latest video. Okay, Glenn, don't worry. I see your questions there. I was talking about what I was talking about. Kevin has been trying to get me to get me a link through the chat here. So I want to address Kevin first because he's been trying to figure out how to get me to his content to check really quick. But I'm going to come right back to you, Glenn, Spanish student learning English. Just give me one quick second to listen to Kevin's video here. Okay, so I listened to the first 15 seconds. Now, as I said, I can't necessarily give you like every little last tiny detail, but your pronunciation is very solid. It's very, very good. You do have a little bit of an accent. I probably wouldn't be able to tell where you're from. I don't hear any characteristics of this language or that language. I see based on the phone, because I clicked on the first video that was listed, it's in Spanish. So I'm going to assume you're a Spanish speaker, and I can't tell that you are a Spanish speaker based on your pronunciation, at least in that 15 seconds. So that's good. That's a very good place to be. The way that you're going to further refine that, whether you're starting pronunciation or you're trying to get that last little percentage of pronunciation, the mouth posture is going to be the key, no matter what. The mouth posture. So I'm just going to redirect you right back to the mouth posture playlist. That's going to help you a lot. Your breath is a little low. You could probably use a little more breath. Spanish doesn't use as much breath, and it's a little shift. You got to play with it and get used to it. There's exercises in those lessons. But I can hear you could probably push out a little bit more breath. Some of your sounds are a little bit off. The way your posture is a little bit off. Even if, which I confirmed this with my old Spanish partner the other day. I went from, in singing, because I've only practiced in singing, at least, not in speech, I've gone from sounding very close to a native, it's really good, not really, nobody would be able to tell where I'm from, going from that to you sound like a native. So yeah, it's the posture. Even for me, because I didn't know about posture or anything before. I know my rhythm in Spanish is off as well, because I didn't know about that when I was teaching myself Spanish, but I was able to, through my natural apparent talent, I guess, and practice. I did a lot of practice, of course, but I was able to approximate very closely the Spanish sounds, but I was still using American posture. And as long as I'm using American posture speaking Spanish, I'm not going to sound like a native. It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. You have to have the right posture. You can get really, really, really close, but you're not going to be 100%. So it's all about the posture. I'm just going to direct you there. That's going to cover your throat, your tongue, how to control your tongue so that you can actually do the adjustments to break out of your posture, get into American posture, build the sounds. It includes the breath, the lips, everything that you need. But as I said, it's still in process. I want to say process progress. It's still in the process of being created and explored. So not all the lessons are done yet. Okay, Glenn, thank you for being patient. Welcome, Finn. I'm a Spanish student learning English. Okay. I'm currently struggling with the word what? I've never even heard that word ever. That looks like do any, like combined. When you add the horse and what? Yeah, that doesn't quite make much. That doesn't really make any sense at all. Can I have some help with these English terms as possible? Okay, so either you do have very bad English teachers, or this is a very elaborate troll. I'm going to assume you're not a troll. Let me go to the dictionary and see if this is a word. It is not. Maybe it's a typo. Did you misspell it? Okay, when you add the horse and motorbike, makes absolutely no sense. Really makes me want to think that you're trolling. D-O-N-Y. I don't think that's a word either. Not in the dictionary. So yeah, I'm going to say you have very, very bad English teachers, unfortunately. Because they're teaching you words that aren't even words. And I really don't know where horse and motorbike are coming from. So yeah, if you want to further clarify or explain, I mean, I can try to address it, but there's the way your question is now, there's nothing to explain because it just doesn't make any sense. We're talking about a word that doesn't exist. So vivisection, is it done on living animals? I mean, are they still alive during the effort? I don't know. I've heard that word a few times. It's more of a specific word that's used in that field. I have no idea. The dictionary will probably tell you. The dictionary is really good for the meaning of words. Not so good for pronunciation, but really good for the meaning of words. Okay. Can tap T... Okay, so Alan, welcome, Alan. Tap T and dental T sound similar. Okay, so with... I need you to clarify. Because you say tap T, I don't know if you just mean like the regular English T sound, or if you're talking about the flapped D sound, because it's also sometimes called tapped D. I think tapped or flapped. And a lot of teachers, if it's written with a T, they'll call it a tap T or a flap T, but there is no tap T or flap T. It's always a D sound. So I need you to clarify, are you talking about the difference between dental T and regular T? Or are you talking about the difference between dental T and the flap, like I'm going to assume it's the regular T, but please clarify that first, and I'll come back to you. Jonathan, welcome. Welcome. Let me know if you have questions. Delio, great tips on how to pronounce the R, flap D plus R. Can't stop practicing. I'll probably fall asleep saying order. Yeah. When your tongue starts to hurt, you know you're probably on the right track. But see, also, I want to mention, when I first read that question in the comments from the video that I took that from, my first thought was, I could tell you, but it's pointless if you don't have mouth posture. At this point, I'm pretty much convinced. Like if you just want to be understood, right, and you want to sound pretty clear and maybe not perfect, but people understand you, you don't need mouth posture. It's like overkill. It'll still help you a lot. You just don't have to put in quite as much work, so you can still go through it and gain benefits from it. But it's not necessary to be understandable. However, if you want to sound really good, mouth posture becomes not critical, but very useful. If you want to sound like a native or almost like a native, like 99% to 100%, the mouth posture, in my opinion, is pretty much necessary. And if that's the case, right, getting questions about like, oh, how do I do like the flap D? How do I do flap D plus R? How do I do? Okay, well, if I explain this to you and you try to do it using your language's mouth posture, that's kind of a problem. Again, if your goal is just to sound better, okay, fine. If you have a bit of talent, then without explicitly learning mouth posture, but just based off of really good explanations, like I hope I give, you should be able to at least get very, very close to sounding fantastic or native, like a native. But I'm always aiming at the lowest practical level. Obviously, I can't target absolute beginners. I would love to target absolute beginners with mouth posture because it's like, hey, before you even start English, learn pronunciation. That's the secret key to learning faster and easier for any language overall in the long run. But since I'm making content in English, obviously there's a certain bottom level that I can apply to, which would be maybe A2 into B1. A lot of you guys are probably B2, C1. So with what was I saying? I was talking about that for a reason. With the mouth posture, oh yeah, that's right. I'm trying to, like, if you have some talent and you do or do not do the mouth posture, you're probably going to come out pretty fine. Maybe not perfect, but you're probably going to come out pretty fine. Where I'm trying to consider the average person, maybe even people who are below average, and say, okay, this is a step-by-step process that breaks everything down and allows you to, might take you a little longer if you're below average, might take you, might be more difficult if you're below average, but it's still a path for if you want to reach that goal, or at least if you just want to make really big improvements. This is the path to do it, and it's broken down for you in a way that anybody can follow. So for somebody like David, or maybe even Finn, I could explain something like that, and you guys will probably do pretty well because you already have a good grasp of what your mouth is doing in English, and you get good feedback and good results. Maybe you didn't study mouth posture, but you kind of got to that point anyway. Maybe you just kind of ended up doing the mouth posture accidentally. But somebody else who maybe doesn't really have much talent, they really don't know what to do. They just kind of want to be like, okay, just tell me what to do to improve. When I talk about flap D plus R, it's kind of like, it's almost pointless to even tell them about that. It's like, well, let's hold on. Let's start with phase 0 so you can feel your tongue first and manipulate your tongue. Because if you can't even do that, you shouldn't be worrying about how to flap your D and do an R and do that transition, because you got to control your tongue first. There's no point if you don't do that. So phase 0 and then phase 1, we find the center of gravity. Once you have the center of gravity, the right, jaw's a little more open. We're centered down a little bit, nice and open. Okay. Now you're in a position to say, let me try to do this sound. Let me try to do this sound. Let me try to do this transition. Okay. But before that, it's kind of pointless for most people. So that's why I'm really trying to push on this mouth posture stuff. And I really do think it's the key if you want to sound like a native. So, okay, Finn, does my become in fast speech? It can, yes. What about normal speech? I always try to pronounce an I that's just quieter and faster. Okay, good question. Come back to that. Let me answer this question first. I just saw the next comment. Yeah, so my can become ma, just like I can become you can cut the diphthong and say the ah, right? So you can say ma, 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 ma. But it's easily just another half step to uh. So I or my, ah, ma, something kind of like that. It's weird to do in isolation because we don't do it, especially if it's like these things usually don't happen as like the last sound. um, we tend not to do that. Just like you can't contract if there's nothing after it. It's a thing that we have. It's like a barrier in English. But anyway, fast speech, no problem. Yeah, if I say, let me get my car, let me get my car, let me get my car, let me get my car. It's not really going to stand out too much. In normal speed speech, I'm going to say no. You run the risk, you might hear it, but you run the risk of it sounding uneducated and or just too informal, like excessively informal. So if I say, let me get my car, let me get my car, it sounds sort of like I'm trying to imitate a stereotypical uneducated Southerner. Obviously, that's a stereotype, but it's a stereotype that a lot of Americans have. Obviously, Southerners aren't stupid, but that's a stereotype. So if we're trying to sound uneducated or Southern, right, whether we actually change our accent or not, that's a type of thing that we might do in normal speed speech. In fast speed speech, it can just happen. It's no problem. Now, in normal speed speech and even fast speech, can you not reduce it to and just kind of either say I shorter and quieter because it's not stressed, like extra short, quiet, or maybe cut that diphthong? Yes, that perfectly fits still in fast speech. That definitely perfectly fits in normal speech. Reducing it all the way to is sort of like an extreme thing where it's really starting to break, but the fast speech will hide it and it's okay. So there you go. Okay, Glenn. So he ties the horse to the motorbike outside Apple Green in Arklow. Now, the funny thing is, this is, hold on, outside Apple Green in Arklow. Green. I'm pretty sure, I'm 99% sure this is a grammatically correct sentence. That's the funny part. But it makes no sense. It makes no sense. So I'm going to assume, and forgive me if you're not Glenn, I'm going to assume Glenn is a troll. Because there's no other way to explain this. But since there's not really anything offensive going on as far as I can tell, I'll let it stay there. So Glenn had a bit of fun, I guess. Finn, can you say have you for have you with as in set? What about have you with a schwa? Okay, good question. Very good question. I'm going to tie this also into that previous one because I just released a video about eating vowels. Eating vowels, right? So first, can you drop the vowel in my? Can you drop the vowel in my? We're probably not going to. In really fast speech, it definitely becomes much more possible. In the flow of normal speech, I'm going to say no. But if I say, instead of my car, like, let me get my car, let me get my car. And say I'm speaking fast, I reduce it to let me get my car, let me get my car. Okay. What if I don't try to say m like really fast? I just try to say and then release a k. Let me get him a car. 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 Yeah. Now there can still technically be a very, very tiny little bit something between the M and the K, but it's basically gone. Now, if you really try to force that, again, this is fast speech. If you try to force that and you say, let me get car, now you're breaking the flow, you're breaking the rhythm. It's not going to work. So as I briefly mentioned in the vowel eating video, in fast speed speech, remember it's a dynamic range. If you're speaking more slow and clear, you can't really eat vowels. okay, because it defeats the purpose of speaking slowly and clearly, right? In normal speech, there's lots of times where we can eat vowels, especially on single syllable function words, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes things will just reduce. Like diphthongs, I think, don't really want to be completely eaten, but cutting the diphthong, I think you're sort of eating the end of it, right? So it's still there, it's just not fully there. And then fast speech is where a lot of things can break, and that includes further vowel eating, where we wouldn't normally completely eat a vowel, you can actually start eating that vowel because of the speed. So you got to be a little bit careful with things sometimes. When we're talking about have and you, okay. So over here, have you, we hear h, a, v, right? That v and the y are sort of linking together a bit. And then ooh, have you. We know you can reduce to ya. We're not going to care about that part because we're not focused on that. So for the have, okay. I can say have you, very clear. I can say have you. Now, if I slow that down, I say have you. Maybe it can come out that way, but it's like I'm down in this range. It's supposed to be an a, not an e, and it kind of sounds like, why are you saying have? Have isn't a word, right? So probably not. It's starting to get a little weird, but in the flow of normal speech, saying just a little bit faster, the have you seen it? Have you seen it? Have you seen it? Have you seen it? Not really too much of a big deal. Schwa. Have you seen it? Have you seen it? Have you seen it? Yeah, schwa works too, especially in really fast speed. Can you eat the vowel? Yes, you can. You can go from H straight into V, which is kind of weird because H is just breath, right? So technically, we're going to be in some position before the V. That'd be an F. See, I can already pretty much be in that V. Push out the breath without the voice. Okay, it's not going to quite sound like an F because I'm not completely in that F. Okay, there's still enough space for to sound just like an H, it's just breath. But then I just make a little close with my lip, bottom lip, and we're in the V, add the voice. Have you seen it? Have you seen it? Have you? So the H actually almost starts to immediately get voice as we're starting to close into the V, but it needs to start voiceless. So you can go so far as to eat the vowel, and that will still work for this because I'm saying have you seen? It's present perfect. It's function word. It's not really stressed. So even in the flow of normal speech, you can go ahead and eat that vowel. You need to be on the faster end of normal, but you can go ahead and go all the way down to eating the vowel. So you can go from a to e to to nothing. Possible. Yeah. I heard this guy doing don't occur. Is that even a thing? You're welcome, Kevin. Don't occur. They don't occur in this region. They don't occur in this region. They don't occur in this region. Okay, so this is don't quote me on this because there's a couple different things going on in my head right now that can maybe explain or partially explain it. I'm gonna go with no, that doesn't work. That's the opposite. I've noticed this. I have noticed this myself. It's not supposed to be that way. It's not supposed to be there. In this particular case, it does make some sense because if there's a T sound, right? If I fully enunciate don't, right? So technically they're supposed to be a T. We know that we can stop the T and not actually push it out. We know that we can do this sort of not dental O. There's no dental O. Do a nasal O, drop the N in the T, right? There's some advanced things that we can do. But at that, basic, fullest, proper, correct level, there's a T there. Don't, right? And what's after that T is a vowel. And we know that T is going into vowels. T likes to become a D in American English. I'm going to assume this guy was an American speaker. If he wasn't, then I have no answer for you, because I don't know why things happen in other dialects. But within the context of American English, oh, Delio's blowing up the chat. That's good. I'm going to say that even though it shouldn't be happening, it's weird. I wouldn't say it's normal. It does happen sometimes. I've noticed. I wouldn't try to mimic it or reproduce it. I would just ignore it. But I would explain it through the fact that T connecting to a vowel likes to become a D in American English. It's part of that American sound. And so it's kind of like, it's almost like the vowel is retrospectively making that T into a D. Of course, it's not going to flap because the N, so we can't really flap it, but it kind of wants to flap, right? It wants to flap because it's a weak T. So anytime there's a weak T, if it can flap, it wants to flap. Sometimes it just turns into a D depending on the sounds around it or like the sound before it. Of course, if it's a strong T, like in time, that has to be a T that will never change into a D because it's a strong T. So yeah, the weak T is that's one of the reasons why T is so complicated in English, especially American English, because the weak T is so malleable depending on what's around it. So and then half the time we could just stop it anyway, right? So it's like we don't have to even push it out to begin with. But okay, can I pronounce something as? Oh, okay. See, quotation marks can help. It's a good thing I'm familiar with, yes, the IPA symbol for the glottal stop. Because otherwise I'd be like, what is that? Can I pronounce something as something? Or even some, just dropping the glottal stop, but keeping it at 2 syllables with a very weak voice change. Oh, I see. Yeah, I confused the. I tried to put a glottal stop at the end of the second one because I saw the question mark, and the glottal stop symbol looks very similar to a question mark, so I misread that. I was like, some what? Some. Yeah. Okay. So there's a little bit of a bigger pattern in the language here, which we're not going to explore because I haven't fully pinned that down. But something. Let's explore the full range of the word something. So we have something, which is something, right? We hear everything. Now you can, of course, you can do ing, you can do een, doesn't matter. I tend to do een. With something, nothing, everything, anything. Those are ones where even Western Americans, we might go back to ung. We'll go n or ung, it's whichever one comes out, it doesn't matter. But we tend to keep e. Unless we're being lazy, it'll naturally kind of go into I. So anyway, the pronunciation of that part we know is variable. It doesn't really matter. You'll still sound perfectly fine at neutral. But that's the whole word, something. Okay. Then let's say the next step down, the first way to sort of reduce it would be something. So we still have that TH, but now we're saying I plus n. And regardless of the exact neutral accent you have in American English, because remember there's more than one, if you do I plus n specifically instead of I plus ng, it's going to sound like it's going to be the informal sounding version. And we would write that IN apostrophe. So if a writer wants it to specifically be read in that way so that they know that it's supposed to be pronounced informally, then we mark it with an apostrophe instead of putting the G. That's the first reduction. Makes it sound more informal. The second reduction would be just like you're saying here, where we'll actually kind of completely drop, or not drop, we'll change the in into and that's because of the M before thing. The TH disappears and just becomes a glottal stop. Some. Now, THs do not normally become glottal stops. This is not a normal thing, okay? It is standard within, say, words like something, for example. But for the language as a whole, THs do not stop. They're not stop sounds, so there's not a glottal stop for them. But this is a special case where we can do this. And I think, I'm not 100% sure, I could probably find it in the etymology. I think this type of pronunciation actually comes out of either the South and or more like African American vernacular, but it is generally widely used throughout the general population, so it's not limited to that. But it does sound a bit more informal, right? Something. It sounds pretty normal, but it's a little informal. It's not as informal as something, which is interesting because we're doing further reduction, yet it doesn't sound as informal. That's just how it is. Then can you take that a step further? Don't do the stop and just say some. Yes. Why, I don't know, but it makes it a little easier to say. Now, I like that you kept two M's there, but be careful because I'm not saying some. I'm not just holding an M, okay? Instead of stopping it, this is actually, it's kind of like, remember how we were talking about like with asks, the SKS, for example, how instead of doing asks back into the S, you can hold that S, bring the back of the tongue towards the K position without actually hitting it, so the S continues. Asks. Okay, it creates the illusion that there's a K, sort of like a light or a half K. This is sort of like a rough equivalent of that for this weird middle of the word stop that's replacing the TH. Instead of actually stopping it and saying some, we're kind of like some. And you don't have to actually like start to try to close it, but you have to modulate your breath, your tone a little bit, and kind of like push the M back out. It's kind of like if we say the other instead of the other, which is fine, you can still say the, but you have to say the other, the, and because it's basically the same sound, you have to just keep going higher and we'll interpret it as the other, and that's perfectly fine. So it's a similar thing here. Except we're not going higher, we're actually probably going lower because it's at the end, right? So some. So it's not a flat N, it's actually a modulating N. And this is actually a further step in vowel eating that I did not talk about in the lesson. I'm probably going to make a lesson about that later at some point. I want to explore that a little bit more, but I noticed as I was making the vowel eating lesson, there was one example that I didn't include. It didn't make it into the final cut because for this very reason, actually. So if we say, for example, store and bought. So this is from like I went to the store and bought a new computer. So store and bought, and will usually reduce either to in, un, or just n, right? The D almost always disappears no matter what you do with the vowel. So we can go all the way to n. Okay, so n is now representing and. So store in. Okay, we're going from to n, so we can get an in between it. Storin, or storin. Or you could just do storn. Storn. Straight from the R to the N. Okay. but there's a B after it. And we know from shifting, the shifting linking rule, t, d, and n, if the next sound starts with a p, b, or or if the next word starts with that one of those sounds, you can shift into that. So instead of doing n for the word and, you can shift it to because there's a b after it. So now we get, instead of storm bot, we get storm bot, not separately, of course. So it'll sound very similar to this, these two words put together. But you can't necessarily just say stormbot. I went to the stormbot. Okay. Oh, jump back up there, but stormbot. There's a little bit of modulation with the voice, like with the tone there. It's not necessarily just like a straight M into a B. And that's part of what helps us know that the word and is there, even though the only trace of the word and left is that shifted N. Okay, so I didn't include that in the lesson because that would have added a whole bunch of extra stuff, and the lesson was already, what, like 20, 25 minutes, and I'm just like, okay, this is gonna be like basic vowel eating information, and then maybe later I'll make a lesson for a little bit more advanced vowel eating. But yeah, there's all kinds of strange things that can happen, especially in fast speech. So very good questions from Finn, as always. Always on the higher end. So you guys that are more advanced, Finn definitely brings all the best questions. In the word now, is there a sound? So is there the a sound? Or I'm tripping? Or am I? See, it's a question, or am I? Like in the words cat, hat, mad. There is not. Now uses the diphthong ow. The problem, when I first started teaching vowels, I actually thought, well, I didn't like believe it, but my first impression was that ow contains ah. It doesn't. It contains ah, which only exists in the diphthongs I and ow. So, but sounds very, very similar to and because it only exists in those diphthongs, you don't hear it anywhere else. It's not used as an individual sound by itself. This is very similar to how a and I end. This sounds kind of like the end in e, but if I make them end in e, it'd be a, I. It's not quite right. It's a, I. Now, if I go, say I say a, and then I go to the end position, I don't move. I just stop the sound and then push the sound back out so we can see what sound is actually there. A, I, I, a, I, a, I, I. So it's an I sound. That was a weird thing in the middle before my tongue got a little extra tense. So it ends in the I position, even though it doesn't sound like it ends in the I position. For now, it starts in the a position. It's really hard for me to isolate it and talk about it because it doesn't exist individually in English. But it's something like ah. So the a sound is not the a sound. And now does not have a. Now, if you used a in now, and you said, instead of now, if you said like now, it sounds okay. You could probably get away with it. But it will immediately, because a is a little farther forward, and just like the nature of how a is created, like in cat, it makes it sound sort of like you're trying to push out or emphasize it. So if I say like, do it now, like we might even naturally kind of extend it out into possibly. But if you say like, do it now, you're not going to say it's not do it now. See, that sounds kind of weird. Now, there may also be regional or slight dialectical differences from like people who otherwise sound generally neutral. Maybe this is a shift that has happened in that region. I don't know. So you might hear it from that, but standard, no, it shouldn't be that way. Jonathan, what's the difference between tap and touch? Okay, so meaning. They're very similar. Touch is what I like to call an umbrella word. Umbrella word. So an umbrella, of course, for those of you who don't know, if it's raining outside, you have the thing and you do the thing and it creates a little thingy, just like that, right behind me. That's an umbrella. I have an example right behind me and I didn't even realize it. Yeah, so that's an umbrella. Of course, that's not for rain, but it's an umbrella. So an umbrella word is a word where it's ideally it's the least specific version of a category, right? So it's like a category word. And under that category or umbrella, there's going to be maybe like some more specific words that have some extra information or slight differences in meaning. So a good example is like cook. Cook is just a general verb. You can cook in many different ways, right? But if you bake, if you boil, if you fry, okay, these are specific ways of cooking. So they're all under cook. You're cooking no matter what you're doing. But what specific way are you cooking? Okay. Touch is one of those types of words. It's an umbrella or category word. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's anything higher than touch because that's one of the main senses. So it should be a category word. So touch is just touch, right? Like I can touch, I can touch, I can touch. Technically, if like you hit somebody, you're touching them, right? Like you have to make contact touch. But that's sort of so far removed and has such a different meaning. Technically, it's under you are touching, but it's like way over here, and there's a lot of force behind it. So it kind of moves into its own thing where we don't really think of it as touching anymore. it's too much, too much force, too much touch behind it. But tap would be a light touch. That's how you would define tap. It's a light touch. So there you go. So tap is the same thing as touch, except it's light. It's very light. Now you can maybe tap hard, kind of like that, like with a little bit of force, but it's not going to be like a punch, right? Like you can't do too much damage with this unless maybe you're hitting somebody's eye or something. And if you're doing the eye, then it becomes poke. You poke someone in the eye. You don't tap an eye. And obviously, if you're poking, you are touching. But poke sounds like it's kind of going in. It's like sort of tap touch inward, right? So I can sort of poke my eye, poke my stomach. Facebook obviously has poke. There's a special meaning of poke where it is a tap, but it's like it's friendly, it's playful. It's not like the actual literal physical like poke in the eye meaning. So there's different shades, slightly different uses of words, but I think you get the idea. Tap is a form of touch. Okay. I heard someone saying that word exactly the way you described. Which one? That was one of the questions. That S. That was one of the questions. I was going to make in the slide, but forgot to note. They said something like yeah. So very intriguing. I don't know what really happened. Yeah, so we covered that already. Is they a neutral pronoun, or a neutral noun, even though I'm speaking about one? So it's pronoun. It's not a noun. It's a pronoun, which replaces a noun. I think I made a mistake up there. I heard someone say, like, where? Yeah, they said something like blah, blah, blah. Okay. Excellent question. Excellent question. And follow up, is that standard using they to refer to one person? Okay. If you ask someone we might describe as a grammar Nazi, no, you should not do that ever. It's horrible English, and you're gonna burn for eternity if you do that. In reality, the way people actually speak, not only is it perfectly acceptable, but yes, it actually is standard. It is perfectly standard. It's not informal in any way. It is the way that we speak. Okay. So they is right? The basic meaning of it that you learn is correct, right? It's more than one person that you're not a part of. More than one person. Yeah. So it's a group of people that you're not a part of. There we go. um, so if I say they are over there, okay, so I'm not part of them. They are over there. And that's the basic general meaning. Everybody will agree that that is the meaning of they. But at some point in history, probably quite a while ago, since this is very standard now, this probably started maybe back in like the 1800s or something. I don't know. But and there's actually two reasons. There's a more modern reason for it, which I do want to briefly touch on because I have some a couple words to say about it. But some of the reasons that people give for this, that's a more modern explanation that isn't accurate. It just happens to be convenient. Using they to refer to one person is perfectly fine if you don't know if it's a male person or a female person. Okay. And this is where we start to get onto a little bit of a rocky path. So in a very standard way, there's no politics, there's no anything behind this, a very just standard way of speaking. If you don't know the person, if it's a male person who said it, a female person who said it, or if it doesn't matter if it's a male person or a female person, in the sense that like someone said this, right? Someone, we don't know, right? Someone could be a man or a woman or whoever, it doesn't matter. Someone said it, we don't care who. That someone can be replaced with they. Okay, and actually it will be replaced with they. That's the standard thing to do. Now, traditionally, what the grammar folks, crazy grammar folks will tell you, is that you're supposed to say he or she, like not either one, but you're supposed to say, instead of like they said something like blah blah blah, you're supposed to say he or she said something like blah blah blah. Okay, and you could still do that. That's possible, but it's kind of a mouthful. We don't like to do that, and it's much easier to just say they. Okay, so again, it's not informal, it's not incorrect grammar, it is perfectly normal, perfectly fine, real speech. Now, there's a little bit more of a political use of this that very conveniently aligns with things, which is when we're talking about like gender neutrality. And I don't really want to go too much into that because that's not what this channel is about. But I've seen a couple times online where somebody asked a question like this, and the person explained it from this sort of political, like gender neutral type of perspective. And some people, instead of like they personally identify, they don't identify as male, they don't identify as female, they feel like maybe they're sort of other or in between or something, and they prefer, instead of being referred to as he, him, his, they prefer if you refer to them directly, or sorry, indirectly, as they, them, theirs, right? So if I say, oh yeah, Tom doesn't like their car, meaning his car, right? Now, normally in that case, there would mean Tom doesn't like the car that is owned by these people. But if we're talking about someone who's using they, them, their as their personal pronoun, then you're going to say, then their car refers to Tom's car. So it gets really weird. It starts to kind of break the language a little bit. It still works. I think this is generally a minority of people, and I don't have a problem with it personally. I don't like when we go so far that we really start breaking the language and come up with a bunch of random sounds to refer to people, like jim, whatever. I don't want to offend anybody. It's just my personal perspective. I could be wrong, but I would not explain the use of they to refer to one person in that way, although that is one sense that they is used in modern times. What I'm referring to is just a very normal standard use of they to refer to a particular person without any gender neutrality or politics involved. It's just normal language. So I don't want you to get those two confused in case you see something online of somebody explaining it from that perspective. So, okay, now that that's out of the way, hopefully I didn't ruffle too many feathers, which is an expression we have, ruffle too many feathers, meaning hopefully I didn't upset too many people with that. Because, you know, we're all birds. So the expression makes perfect sense. Back to the chicks, right? English is so weird. Not a question, but I find that when I nail the mouth posture for American English, not, it seems to have one. I think that's a typo. It seems to have ripple effects on my command of the language as a whole. Interesting insight. I've started to notice that from some other people as well. And a little bit in Spanish, although, as I said, I've mostly been practicing the singing, and I haven't actually tried to transfer it into my speech. I don't have it in my speech. I can't show it for you guys unless I sing, and I'm not going to do that. Not only do I sound way more natural than I usually do, but I even have a much easier time remembering words as I speak. The mouth posture seems to be the soul of the language. Interesting. Very, very interesting. I would agree with that. I would agree with that. There's still things that I'm learning about the mouth posture concept, and the more that I go into it, the more I see results from other people, the more that I explore it myself through Spanish and whatnot, the more I'm starting to see, like, again, if you just want to be understood, you don't have to care. If you want to sound as close to a native as possible, if it's not the only way, it's definitely one of the single biggest, most powerful ways, and it's going to have more benefits than just how you sound, like we're talking about here. It's like, oh, I'm actually remembering words more easily. And I would maybe try to start to explain that through the fact that because you're holding your vocal tract differently, your brain is attaching the actual way that you're physically holding your vocal tract with the language. And so those words come more naturally. Now, you don't need that, obviously, but it's almost like a little physical hack, right? And it makes sense, because what happens if you constantly are walking around like this? Okay. Who knows, chicken or egg, but if you have low self-confidence, you probably walk around like this. And if you walk around like this, it probably also affects your low self-confidence, right? It's sort of reinforcing. There's lots of research on like the way that you hold your body can actually affect like your mental state in this. And we know like the words that we say to ourselves can have a big impact on our mentality as well. And so it only makes sense to me, even though it seems like a small thing, that the way that you hold your mouth posture, your vocal tract overall, if you're trying to get it into more of an American posture, just something that's different than your native language, that your brain is then going to associate that with the language, and everything is, at least theoretically, going to flow a lot more easily. So that makes perfect sense to me. Perfect sense. Not something I expected, but it makes perfect sense. I think this is something Idausa, yeah, I think there's only one S, but yeah, Idausa said in one of his vids where he was talking about how important it is to master an accent when you learn a language. He wasn't specifically talking about the mouth posture, though. Fluent Americans here. Welcome, welcome. Glad to see you pop by. Just having a very long, interesting discussion about various things related to pronunciation, as always. Hope you're doing well. Back to Delio. So there's an interesting thing, and I have reservations about this because I'm going to keep this very, very general. Okay, so for Idausa, right? I've mentioned Idausa. Some of you guys didn't know who Idausa was. I introduced you to him through the channel and stuff, and it's like, hey, go check out this guy. I do think Idausa, like among at least the polyglots that I know online, I'm not too much in the loop anymore. I know there's some other people who have kind of come up, but a lot of the big polyglots online, Idausa is sort of who I would refer to as like the king of pronunciation. He talks a lot about pronunciation and mastering accents and stuff, and that's sort of his thing. Never met him. Hopefully one day, that'd be cool. But number one, I've not heard him talk about mouth posture either. Number two, obviously he knows what he's talking about. Number three, uh, probably because of, I guess, the apparent talent I have or whatever. I really don't like mentioning that or whatever, but it's relevant. I never would have said I had talent for anything if you asked me like 5-10 years ago, but probably because of that, and he probably has some talent for it too. And we have this natural curiosity for pronunciation. That's where most of it comes from. We put in the work, we put in the exploration, and we actually, try to do this stuff. We naturally came up with similar terms like micro adjustments. I was using that, you know, before I even discovered DDoS, and I was like, oh, we use the same terms. So him and I would agree on a lot of things. We'd, probably use even a lot of similar terms. It would almost seem like sometimes maybe I'm copying off of him and like taking his terms. And I think there's one or two terms that I probably borrowed from him, yes. But the point here is that obviously he has really good results, but I haven't heard him talk about mouth posture. I even looked up on YouTube. I was like, Edos and Ness mouth posture, mimic method mouth posture, and I didn't find any results. I don't know if he's aware of it and he just doesn't use that term, or I'm sure he probably has to at least have heard about it. I'm sure somewhere. But the reason why I have some reservations here, so I have one person I'm working with right now. He's a German speaker from Austria. And so I told him about Idausa Ness, and Idausa, he has a story about when he was like in Germany and he was having this conversation with this guy, and a couple of minutes into the conversation, they're getting along really well, and the person says, oh, so what part of Germany are you from? And he's like, well, I'm not from Germany. And the guy didn't believe him because his German was just so good, including his pronunciation. Obviously he fooled a native, and that's really good, right? Okay, Idausa is great, he knows what he's talking about, blah 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 blah. So this student that I'm working with, he went and he looked up some clips of Idausa speaking German. And according to him, he said, he sounds very German, but I would not confuse him for a native. Now, in this particular case, this student has been working on pronunciation for like 2 years. He has very good ears. Idausa also has very good ears. And yet we have at least one example of a native who is saying that that Idausa doesn't sound like a native, that he wouldn't be fooled. So there might be some varying range where there's maybe the average native speaker is right because they haven't trained their ears for sounds outside of their language. And so maybe you can get away with a little bit more, like just a little bit of inaccuracies that might come along with, say, the mouth posture, and still fool the average person, but maybe not every native speaker. So I don't know. Again, I haven't met Idausa. I'm not a German native speaker. I'm just going off the words of this particular person. But there seems to be some sort of potential conflict here. And so I kind of wonder if there's maybe something in there that I don't even know how to express what I'm saying right now, but obviously Dowsett definitely knows what he's talking about, and a lot of the techniques and stuff that I mean, I haven't watched all his material. I don't like sit and watch all his material, but I've seen quite a few of his videos over the years, and it's really good stuff. But the fact that he doesn't talk about mouth posture specifically is very interesting to me, because with how important and useful mouth posture is becoming in my mind as I further explore and develop techniques around it, it seems like something that he should have been like, I would have expected to hear him talking about this like 10 years ago, if he was even making content 10 years ago. I don't know. It's just, of course, I didn't know about it either until like 5 months ago, maybe now. So I don't know. Maybe he just hasn't heard of it. But a lot of the techniques that he talks about underpin mouth posture, like getting control over your tongue. That's what phase 0 is all about. Phase 0 for the mouth posture course, it has nothing to do, well, I don't want to say nothing, because it will indirectly inform and affect how you make the sounds, but phase 0 isn't, it's language agnostic. So it's actually just about getting basic control over your vocal tract to a sufficient extent that you can then go and explore how to make the sounds. Instead of, it's like if you can't move your hand, you don't know how to move your hand, you can't play, you can't throw a ball, right? So if before you can throw a ball, you have to figure out how to move your hands, right? Otherwise it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to try to pick up the ball and kind of like throw it as best I can. Like, why? You learn to use your hands first. So anyway, and a thought that just occurred to me, it could also be that perhaps mouth posture is one sort of systematized concept that wraps everything up, and perhaps Idausa either hasn't heard of or doesn't care about that particular encapsulation, and he just, like, he's still essentially doing a lot of the same work, just without that particular framework. I don't know, but anyway, I don't know. Kevin, low-key roasting Rachel and her speaking from the chest video. Yeah, I feel like I got to do it, unfortunately. Don't know Rachel either. Seen some of her videos. I think she does really great work. I always have to give the credit where it's due. But I cannot agree. Like, if you're going to ask me for my view, as I've said before, I think I know what she's trying to do with that, and it does work for some people. Obviously, she said she's had success with it, but I think it's instead of telling you what to do to get greater control over your vocal tract, this whole like placement and speaking from the chest thing, it seems sort of like a cop out, where it's like, oh, just bring everything down. And I have a student that I started working with recently where he already knew about, the placement and the speak from your chest stuff. And we started to do some work with the throat control, just like the 4 directions of the throat. No big deal. And he was under the assumption that he was trying to move his throat down so that he could affect his placement. And so he went out, he did some practicing, and then he had to like go do something. And he's in an English speaking country. So he was out there speaking, and he was trying to like lower his throat. And so he was kind of trying to talk like this, and it was just giving him a deeper voice. And I'm like, yeah, I want you to ignore that whole idea of placement and speaking from your chest, because it can cause a lot of issues, like just artificially deepening your voice without actually giving you the control over your throat and your tongue, without actually allowing you to manipulate your tongue into the proper sounds. And we know there's all kinds of little things. There's the breath, the throat, the tongue. So again, I think Rachel does really great work. Obviously, she's like the biggest channel on YouTube. But this is one point that I just cannot agree on. So it is what it is. Conveniently for me, of course, it gives me an angle to stake out and stand out on, but I'm not doing that just to stand out. I'm doing it because it's something I believe in. So, and it's based in my own experience. This whole speaking from the chest thing is not in my experience. When I try to do it, it doesn't make any sense to me. So when people come to me and they're like, how do I speak from the chest? I'm like, I don't know. Whenever I try to do it, I don't sound any more like an English speaker. So, I don't know how that's going to help you. Especially since I usually feel most of my vibrations coming from the throat. Like, I don't get it. Are you going to continue your logical preposition series? Yeah, good question. So I am. The thing is, I really don't want to. I kind of shot myself in the foot with that. So I have the book. Obviously, the book has more examples than the videos. There's literally hundreds of examples in the book. not for each preposition, but overall. I think there's something like 700 or 800 examples or something like that in the book. Tons and tons and tons of examples. I could not fit all those into video unless I wanted to be like 2-3 hours per video. Already the videos are pretty long, and as you can tell from like the various images that I use, and I try to like move things around and add all this stuff, it takes me a long time. Like for a video, like I remember for the preposition on, main one, right? Because there's like, I think there's 3 parts to it because there's just so much with on, but the first main one, it took me over 50 hours, 50, not 15, 50, over 50 hours to make that video. And that was when I wasn't quite as busy as I am now. So I really don't want to make those videos because I don't want to go through the editing, but I do want to make the videos for you guys. What I decided a few months ago is that, so if I were to just say, okay, I'm going to focus on the preposition videos, that is the only thing that I would be able to do for the channel. And because I'm really busy and it's going to take me, 30, 40, 50, 60, however many, dozens of hours to complete just one preposition video, that could easily take me, I don't know, like a month, maybe 2 months. And if I got really, really consistent with it, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try to put in like 2 or 3 hours a day, and I'm just going to like do this every day and like cut some other things out and just do this, it still would take me at least probably like 2 weeks to finish one of those videos. So it's really hard to make those. So I decided that the only way that I can make more of those, if I make more of those, which I do plan to, the only way that I can make more of those is if I have an editor who I can then say record some pronunciation or like some other regular content, give that to my editor so that I don't have to take the time, because the editing takes me the longest time anyway. They can do that while I work on editing the preposition video. That's the only way that I'm going to be able to do that and continue making content on the channel. Otherwise, you guys are going to have to wait an insanely long time just for like the next video. And it's not even like the production quality isn't even going to be, justifiable for that. It's not like a movie or something. So I have to at least have an editor, and I can't afford an editor right now. I'm trying to get the channel up to a certain point between like the Patreon, the YouTube memberships, the AdSense. Right now I'm only making like $40 a month in AdSense, and they don't even give you the money until you reach 100. So I'm not even getting any money from the ads. Like it's like once every 3 months right now. Obviously not enough to pay an editor. So that's kind of what I'm trying to work towards, is get to the point where I can hire an editor. I can hopefully make some more of those preposition lessons. I do definitely, whether I make more of those lessons or not, I am going to be making more content around that concept and talking about like specific example sentences and like, oh, hey, like in this phrase, like it's just like a random thing. Like in this phrase, we use on because the logic, blah, 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 blah. Check out the book for more information. So I am going to like examples that aren't actually in the book, like other things like, oh, hey, I realized in this sentence, this is why we say this. And then I make a video about it. Like I am going to make more content about it that's sort of shorter form and based around like a particular sentence. So there will be more preposition content regardless. But the main preposition lessons, if they happen, they're not going to happen until I get an editor. Okay, Abdullah, welcome. Losing game, how would you pronounce it? Which, by the way, Abdullah, I answered your question earlier. You probably weren't here. I don't know what the timestamp would be exactly, but it was probably like an hour ago. About the R to flap D to R. So if you can't find it, it's too big of a hassle. I'll try to find it and link it later, the timestamp later. But losing game, how would you pronounce it? Like a losing game, like that's not even grammatically correct. Oh, okay, playing a losing game. Yeah, okay, that works out. I was thinking like losing a game. Losing game. So for me, because I pronounce the added ing usually as e plus n, It would be zine. You could say losing, plus that's fine also. It's very neutral. They're both very neutral. And then, so if you go losing and then into the front end, and then you have that game, losing game. But see, because there's the game after that, we can shift from the N into the G. So even in the way that I would pronounce it, losing, usually, I'm actually probably going to say losing. So I'm going to actually do E, maybe it doesn't matter. It can happen if I get lazy. But E plus instead of E plus N, because I'm shifting back into the G, losing game. So it'd be losing game. You just release the G in game. So yes, there would be a back end there. Normal unvoiced TH plus dental T. What? Normal unvoiced TH plus dental T. With time. So fully enunciated with time. With time. We might push it out like that to be clear. But you can say with time. With time. With time. Remember, the only time that you can use a regular T or D as a dental version is if there's a TH before it. And then they can link like that. Now, the word with is not really fair because since it's a super, super common preposition and it's usually not stressed, we actually tend to kind of just drop the TH in most cases, especially in a case like this where we can do that dental. So instead of moving to the dental, you can just say with time. There's just no TH there. You just do a regular T. So that's sort of a special case. But you could do with time, or with time. There's 3 options there. All of them are perfectly fine and normal. Why is pronunciation usually the most difficult part to master in a language? Is it though? I don't know. It's a good question. I'm actually not sure what the most difficult part is. It's definitely a difficult part for sure. Part of my answer would go back to the mouth posture, right? If you don't have the right mouth posture, you're trying to, let's say you speak Spanish. So your mouth posture is a circle. Not literally, I'm just saying, let's just say it's a circle. Then say American English mouth posture is a square, which I can't do with my hand, but we'll say this is a square. Okay. Now, if you try to learn English pronunciation using Spanish mouth posture, you're trying to fit square sounds into a round hole. It's not going to work very well. Now, eventually, right, you can try to ram that square into the hole so much that the corners shave off and the square will go in, but then you have gaps, right, which is, your accent isn't perfect, right? This is a very strangely accurate metaphor. So instead, change your mouth posture from a circle to a square, and then get those square sounds. Like, then you won't have any holes. Now, that work in itself is difficult. It's not easy, but the hardest part is getting mastery over your vocal tract, which is the phase 0 stuff. Once you pass phase 0, which isn't American English specifically, it's just like, can you move, say, the back of your tongue up, down, forward, back by itself without the rest of the tongue moving, without the throat getting involved, and with enough range that it's clear you're not going up and back, you're going up a lot, down a lot, right? Once you can pass those checkpoints that I set up in phase 0, with the tongue, with the throat, with the breath, then you have enough control over your vocal tract, especially the tongue, to actually break out of your circle posture, find the square posture, which would be the center of gravity, reinforce that to where you can do it, relatively easily and automatically. Now you have a new posture, you have a new base, a new foundation that you can then build the entire pronunciation on. Okay. Otherwise, you're kind of trying to build on sand, and it's just not going to work. So once you do that really hard work of phase 0, everything else on top of that, it's not easy, but it's relatively easier because you can actually control your mouth now instead of trying to get the sounds without knowing how to actually control your mouth. So it makes it a lot harder if you can't control your mouth. What happened? The T confuses me, not going to lie. Is it flap T or stop held? Good question. So let's see here. If I fully super clearly enunciate, we probably wouldn't do it in this case, but I could say what happened. That sounds like maybe you're not listening to me and I'm like, hey, listen, what happened? Okay, probably push out that T. Special case. Now there's a couple things that can happen through the flow of normal speech, even in slower speech, as long as we're not super clearly enunciating and separating it. So there's two options here. We know that a T at the end generally wants to stop. If there's nothing that it connects to, it's probably going to stop. Okay, there's cases where it can drop and this and that, but the default thing to do would be stop. It would be what happened, what happened, what happened, what happened. And you can just push that H straight out from that glottal. You don't have to actually remember the T, the glottal T. You don't have to actually go into the T position. It's just pure glottal. You can do that. That's fine. All the other stop sounds, you have to go into the position, but for T, you don't. So instead of bringing the tongue up for here, you just do the pure glottal and then let that air out for the H. What happened, what happened. Very natural. You can actually, even there's a second thing you can do here. You can drop the T and say, what happened? What happened? You don't need to do the glottal at all. This T is actually droppable. So that's two things. Three, if you count the extreme keeping of the T, which would be a special case, but two normal pronunciations. What happened? What happened? The third thing you can do, so here in this particular case, remember, things are contextual and dynamic in American English pronunciation. So it depends on what sounds are around it. And we know that the T in particular is very malleable. It likes to kind of change into a D when it can. So we have a linking rule, more or less, of sorts, where if you have an H at the start of a word, especially if it's an unstressed syllable, but it doesn't have to be. If you have an H at the start of a word, you have a consonant before that, you can link through the H. Okay. Now, you can keep the H and that's fine. You can link through the H. That's fine. Whatever comes out doesn't really matter. Keeping the H will make it a little bit clearer, a little more enunciated, still within normal range. It's not a big deal. But because we can do that, because that rule exists or that possibility exists, what happens if a T at the end of a word connects to a vowel? It becomes a flap D, right? So you can actually link through that H, just drop the H and say, what happened? What happened? So you can see there's three ways in the flow of normal speech, okay, not including that super special case where we're actually pushing out the T, but there's three ways in the flow of normal speech that this could happen to be pronounced. All of them are perfectly fine and equal. There's no formality. There's no anything. It's just three ways, okay? So that's part of the problem with American pronunciation is, as I said, there's not always just one answer. There's usually more than one possibility. It shouldn't be flap D because the next sound is not a vowel. Yeah, so the thing you have to understand about H, I don't know if you saw my lesson on H, but I like to call the H sound the voiceless vowel. And the reason why is because, number one, it's just breath. But number two, it basically just takes the shape of the vowel that's after it, right? So in the case of happen, the vowel is a, and you don't have to be fully into a at the beginning, but basically we're doing happen. If I say heat, right, I'm not saying, it's not like there's a way to form H in the mouth. I go into the E position. Again, it doesn't have to be 100%, but I go into the E position. I start voiceless, and then I add the voice, and I don't move anything. He, unless I'm not fully into it, I can go a little more fully into it. But point is that I'm basically in that vowel shape and making it voiceless. You're doing the voiceless version of the vowel because all vowels are voiced. The H is the voiceless version of all vowels. Okay. And that's part of the reason, other than the fact that it's just breath, doesn't really have any substance there. That's part of the reason why we can usually link through it, because whether the consonant before it is voiceless or voiced, especially if it's voiced, but whether it's voiceless or voiced, it has more substance to it, and it kind of just crushes through that H, and the H will disappear. So technically there is a vowel, there's a voiceless vowel after it, but we're just going to ignore that voiceless vowel and link to the vowel directly. So Very common. What does better off mean? Better off means we're out of time. No. So I just noticed we're out of time. Again, I'm going to try to get to the remaining questions, but now that I say we're out of time, please try to ask no more questions, and I will appreciate it so that we can finish up and I can get going with other stuff I have to do. But better off means, well, better off is one of those phrases where if you ask a native, what does it mean? We want to define it with itself because it's just like, well, it means better off. It's like, what does but mean? But means but. So you have simple example. You have two options, right? You have two choices, whatever. You could choose this. You could choose this. You say, I don't know which one to do. Right? It's like this one seems good, but this one also seems good. Okay. Now let's say that this one, maybe there's some good to it, but there's this like a really big negative thing. Okay. And this one, maybe there's some negative to it, but there's more positive, right? So you say, which one should I do? And I say, well, it sounds like you're better off, meaning you're going to be in a better position, or it's a better opportunity. It's better overall to do this one. So you are better off doing this. Okay. There is a reason why off is used there and the logic and feeling underneath it. Unfortunately, off the top of my head, I can't come up with a quick, easy explanation for that, and I'd have to actually sit and think about it for a second, which I do not have time to do. So I won't cover that part, but that's what it means. Are you not a, I thought every teacher was like that. No, I'm not. I used to be a little closer to one. I mean, I will still get annoyed when natives, like if they're spelling there, right? Because they're pronounced the same, right? They are contracted THEIR, meaning their possession, and their THERE, meaning it's over there or there is something. They're all pronounced the same. And a common native mistake is to use the wrong spelling, right? Or putting your apostrophe RE instead of your, just an R. When if I say your car, right? It's not you are car. There's no apostrophe RE. It's just R. But these are common native mistakes that even I make. Occasionally, if I'm not paying enough attention, I'll have to go back and proofread. But if you're typing, especially if you're texting really quick or whatever, I've had plenty of times where like I go back and I read what I wrote and I'm like, oh, I used apostrophe RE instead of R in your. And that's because they sound the same. And my brain just kind of picked one when I was in the process of writing or texting. So, and I know that there's also, there's usually more than one answer. I try to be very flexible. I know that there's, regional things and dialects and this and that, whatever. And there's more than one neutral pronunciation within, standard general American. So there's pronunciation, there's grammar stuff. Now, if something is just straight up wrong, like earlier, this Glenn person made this like nonsense sentence. What was it? Something about a horse and a motor. Can't even find it anymore. But anyway, obviously, like, even though technically that's a grammatically correct sentence, it doesn't make any sense, right? So it's like, I'm not going to say like, oh yeah, that's perfectly fine English. So if something is just wrong, like regardless, then it's fine. But I really, really hate authoritarianism, and I really hate there's a word I'm looking for. I can't think of it right now. I guess for lack of a better word, I'll say being excessively proper. Because yes, it's true that, like, say for example, ain't. As my second grade teacher liked to say, ain't a word, which is technically true. It's not an official word, and yet native speakers all over, probably even in British English, I don't know, but native speakers of American English from a very early age, almost pretty much as soon as we start speaking, we use it. So it's also kind of like with the African American vernacular, right? Like if they say, like they tend not to conjugate be, which I think is very cool and interesting. They say like we be walking down the street and, you know, something, right? We be walking. That's grammatically incorrect according to the standard, and I will tell you that that's wrong. Okay. But within the context of African American vernacular English, it's not wrong. It's perfectly fine, grammatically proper AAVE, African American vernacular English. And so, especially you guys come to me with like these questions from like hip hop and pop or hip hop and rap songs and stuff, and there's a lot of influence of AAVE on that. And so I have to tell you guys, well, I don't want to say it's wrong in the sense of like a grammar, you know, person would. Saying like, oh, you don't do that. That's horrible. That's just broken language, blah, 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 blah. According to the standard, yeah, it'll either sound uneducated or informal. That's true. So if you don't want to sound that way, if you want to speak standard American English, then avoid that. But if you like the way it sounds and you don't care that it sounds more informal and sometimes, you know, uneducated and whatever, you're just like, I don't care. I want to talk that way. That's your choice. Go ahead. You know, you do you. Because it's what's wrong and right is relative. Anyway, that's a whole other topic. I kind of went way too general and vague with that. So there are some things that bug me, yes, but I'm trying to teach you guys real English at the same time. And if it's something that is real English, like I really hate, for example, not putting prepositions at the end. Number one, that is a rule from Latin that some guy like 400 years ago decided to impose on the English language. Double negatives also. English used to have double negatives, right? We used to say like, I don't know nothing. Now that sounds uneducated or informal, at least. It doesn't sound good. But that's how English speakers used to speak in a long, long time ago, way before modern English. And some guy came along and he said, hey, Latin is a superior language and these are the rules that we should follow in English. And, you know, over time it had effect and this and that, but obviously the influence of French as well. And so there's this ridiculous rule that you can't put a preposition at the end. It's like, okay, yeah, I understand that in Spanish. It's just like, they don't do that in Spanish. But in English, it's something that we used to do before, you know, this guy came along. And now it's something that we do also. Now, because it's a traditional rule from the past however many hundreds of years, there are grammar Nazi people that say, oh, that's wrong, right? You can't do that. And yet almost, I would even say maybe even some of the grammar Nazis themselves, but pretty much anybody who is not a grammar Nazi like that will put prepositions at the end. I can almost guarantee you. From any dialect, American English, British English, Australian English, it's the way English is spoken. You put prepositions at the end. As I said before, it doesn't mean that you have to put all prepositions at the end. You don't want to break the normal grammar. If I say be there on time, don't say there be there time on. Now you're breaking it. But if the preposition lands at the end naturally, there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. And Winston Churchill said, not putting prepositions at the end of sentences is something up with which I will not put. Because that's how we would have to speak with all these phrasal verbs. We'd have to say things like up with which I will not put instead of something I will not put up with, right? No problem. No problem. So that's when the time that I usually like to mention those types of people. It's not when something is just wrong, but it's when they cling to these old rules that are technically still grammar rules, but no native speaker uses them. And you guys are taught those rules. That's the part that bugs me the most. And something I want to fix is that you guys are still taught these rules. And it could even be that, you have a teacher who's not a native speaker who was taught that that's the correct way to speak because it's grammatically correct. And then they taught you because they're not a native speaker. They didn't know any better, right? Maybe their teacher was a native and taught them this horrible, outdated rule that isn't really even a rule anymore. And then they teach you as your English teacher. And then you're like, oh, you come to me and you're like, I hear people are putting prepositions at the end of sentences. Isn't that wrong? No, it's not wrong at all. It's the way the language is spoken. So, and written, by the way. Anyway, spent way too much time on that. How to Google the C Douse and S guy? Yeah, so one S. His last name is Ness, Ness. If you type that into Google or especially YouTube, you'll find him. His channel is the Mimic Method, or just Mimic Method. I don't think he has the word "the" in it, because that's his like brand, and he has like things he built like products around it and stuff using like music and pronunciation and all these techniques and stuff. So if you look at Mimic Method, you'll find him. The thing with oh yeah, see, there you go, Jonathan. Thank you very much. Yeah, Mimic Method. The thing with Idausa may be that he doesn't practice his languages regularly. Yeah, maybe it could be that's where things kind of got mixed up. Maybe when he was actually talking to that German speaker, he was very fresh and maybe like, he was 100% perfect. I don't know. And then when my students saw him speaking, maybe he wasn't so fresh. Could be. Yeah, that's definitely possible. I say this because there's an old video of his where he's speaking Brazilian Portuguese while in Brazil, and he sounds really good. But in a video, not on a video, on can kind of work here, but in a video from last year, I think his accent was somewhat thick, and he even mixed it with a little bit of Spanish. Yeah, that could definitely happen. Yeah, that's the polyglot problem. Whether it's pronunciation or grammar or whatever, it's like you learn a language, you speak it for a while, and then if you want to learn more languages, like once you get past a certain number, it's like, okay, you can't maintain all of them equally, obviously. So like, I don't think you can be fooled for a native in 10 languages at the same time. Like, you could probably be really good and really close if you're, regularly trying to use all those languages and practicing them. But to keep that top 100% full native in so many languages, eventually, the brain can only handle so much. So there's a trade-off there. But which one is right? My elder brother and my elder sister, or my older brother? Okay. And what is the difference? Good question, Meadow. Thank you for your patience. If you're still here. So elder and eldest is technically correct. This is a vocabulary issue. When you are referring to, so some languages make a distinction between objects and people for certain things, right? I think all languages probably do that in some way. Like, we have like who to refer to a person, and we have what to refer to a thing, obviously. Some languages do it more than others. So I know Japanese does that as well, but elder and eldest, right? So so old is the base word, right? That's the adjective. So if you say my sister is old, okay, she's old. When you use the comparative er or the superlative, the est, the most version, so more or most, if you're referring to a person, old becomes elder and eldest. If you're referring to an object like a car, old becomes older and oldest. But this is something that has almost completely changed. Okay, there are some people, some who may be grammar Nazis that we were just talking about, and or some older people. Notice I just said older people when I should say elder people, who think that it is very much incorrect to use older and oldest when referring to a person. And that is absolutely not the case. Elder and eldest is disappearing. It's disappearing. It's not becoming. It's becoming replaced by older. So now older refers to people and things. Older and oldest is starting to replace this. So we just have the one version. This is another example of the many examples I've mentioned of how English tends to be becoming simpler over time, relatively speaking. Now, that being said, referring to a person as old can be rude, especially if you're talking to a woman. So be careful with that. But if you're talking relatively, like you say, oh, she's older than me, that's kind of just a fact, you know, so most people won't really get offended by that. But yeah, so what I would recommend as an English teacher, ignore elder and eldest. Never use them, just use older and oldest. Yeah. You know what's weird about your latest video? You'd say you can reduce this to this. And I'm like, no, the fuck. You can't. Then when I proceeded to say them, I went like, because you already did every single one of the reductions, but I never noticed. Yeah. I was going to mention this, and I think I kind of alluded to this in the video. I was going to mention it, and I didn't directly. Or maybe I did actually. The brain will fill in the details. So just like if I say that example I used in 1666, if I just start with n, or when we say it's something like it's cold, we don't have to actually say the a. You just say it's cold, it's cold, it's cold, right? The brain, unless you're actually listening or you happen to notice, right? Because the brain might actually be paying attention randomly and, oh, I happen to notice you didn't say it. Yeah. But usually the brain isn't paying attention to those little details. It's just interpreting the meaning of the sounds. And so because of how English rhythm works, that's why we can eat these vowels in usually unstressed syllables in these function words, because they're not content, right? And of course, you do have to be kind of careful with some things sometimes, but yeah, the brain will just fill in the details. So, and I already know nobody's made this. I'm waiting for somebody to make this. This I can't think anymore. Not conjecture, objection. Saying that all I'm really doing is showing examples of schwa reduction. When number one, I'm not, because there's the case of when, which is, you know, when reducing to when, maybe reducing to one in like a really short reduced schwa, but it usually reduces to when, not one, right? So you can go all the way, just eat the vowel. But that aside, I think there's a line between like a true reduced super small schwa. Like you can do like and that's like a reduced schwa that you can hear just fine, right? It's not like center of gravity is okay. You can get that even shorter and smaller. Maybe a little shorter and smaller. Okay. At some point it becomes so small that between two sounds it actually doesn't really exist anymore. Right? Because there's the end of this sound and the start of this sound. And that's all that is really there. So at that point, you're eating the vowel, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a schwa, but there are some people who are probably going to object and say, oh, hey, like you're just, you know, doing a really super small schwa. And it can still come out that way. If it reduces to a schwa, it could be just a really super small schwa, or it could be a little more open and enunciated. As I said, at any time, the full pronunciation or anywhere in the range of a reduction can come out. The vowel eating is just the ultimate end of that spectrum, right? So yeah, we go the, z, right? You just get that schwa small. You go from e to nice and clear, and then reduced, and then even smaller, until it just completely disappears. Right, that would be the full range of the reduction. So anyway, Thanks, Josh. So avoiding elder and elders in include. Okay, so how would we phrase that? Is included. Yeah, some typos. Is included in speaking and writing? Question mark. Yes, in writing as well. Now you might find it a little more frequently in writing, particularly in very formal academic writing. Academic writing, business writing is still kind of formal, but it's not as extreme. The most significantly different form of English, modern English, isn't between speaking and writing. It's between everyday speech, which could include things that are informal or not, just regular speech, and academic writing. Academic writing is really the one special weird thing where some of these older rules we might tend to apply them still. Some of them, not all of them. But that's also a weird little case because, like, if you're writing an academic paper, you're not supposed to use I. You're not supposed to refer to yourself as I. You're supposed to say, instead of saying "in my opinion," you're supposed to say "in the opinion of this author." Obviously, that is something completely disconnected from actual, real, everyday speech and even actual, real, everyday writing. Okay, even in a business email, you're not going to say, oh, this message is from your coworker, Josh. Like, you're gonna say this message is from me, right? Like, you can refer to yourself in a business exchange. So in really formal academic writing, you might still see elder and eldest. Again, some people choose to use them, but most people won't. It doesn't matter if you're speaking or you're writing. Guys, no more questions. We're good to go. Have you ever heard someone pronounce carpenter as carpenter? Carpenter. Yeah, that's another thing I've noticed too, where instead of NT plus vowel dropping the N or dropping the T, it can actually kind of become a D. Yeah, sorry, man. So again, I've noticed that. I don't have much comment on it right now. I would just generally ignore it. It's definitely not something you have to do. But it does seem to happen. Yeah. Wendell. Okay, I'll answer Wendell's question since Wendell just got here and then I have to leave. Okay, how do you thanks for your okay, yes. Thank you for coming, Delio. How do you normally LY, how do you normally and naturally pronounce this sentence? Empathizing. Okay, so empathizing is a completely different word than what you want. Emphasizing. Emphasize and empathize are two completely different words. You're talking to me, not to someone else. Is the preposition to fully, you get the Y there pronounced. If you're emphasizing the pronoun me, there's no reason to emphasize to. To is almost never going to be stressed. If the I don't want to say the only time, but pretty much the only time that you're going to have to. Okay, let me take a step back because we're actually not talking about. See, my brain connected fully pronounced with stressed. The full pronunciation of a word is always possible. To, the preposition to, can always be pronounced as to. If you always pronounce it as to, it's going to sound unnatural. Okay, it's statistics. It's always possible that it could be pronounced as to at any time. It could come out that way. But more often than not, the more natural thing to do that's going to happen is it's going to be reduced to. So you can say, you're talking to me. To me. That's fine. You can say, you're talking to me. Talking to me. You could do ooh, it doesn't matter. Or I can say, you're talking to me. That has nothing to do with me. I have to go, Wendell. I can't answer all your questions, unfortunately. What does ain't mean? Ain't means not. I ain't going, you ain't going, we ain't going, they ain't going. It's like not to be, basically. Like it's a negative plus be, basically. We tend to use it with ing informally. I ain't going, you ain't going. Anyway, Wendell, I cannot answer your questions, unfortunately, because I do have to leave. Sorry that you got here a little late. So you can bring these questions next time, and I can answer them for you. This last question you have, though, I will make a brief comment. The best way, like, can you say? Oh, I see. I thought you were asking actually about the best way to learn a language. Hello, Wendell. I have to leave. Communicating with people. The best way to learn languages. Communicate with people. Yeah, the by is optional there. It can be implied. You don't have to actually say it. Okay, so thank you, everybody. I appreciate your understanding that I have to leave. And we'll be here next week, same time. Yeah, have a great week.